Welcome to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown, and on today's show, well, we are in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're coming to you right after the Fearless event that we just happened here with over 650 fearless women in the room. One of my incredible speakers today was Lindsay Lapiquette. Thank you so much for speaking today and for being on the show, Lindsay.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a great event.
Yeah, so much fun and so much great energy in that room today. And you did an incredible talk all about overcoming adversity and basically kicking it in the butt. So let's talk a little bit about overcoming adversity. You basically had, and like many of us who have a story, and it's not always sunshine and roses. Bad things happen in our lives. And let's talk a little bit about your story and kind of the adversity that you've had that's made you realize that how you can overcome things in your life.
Sure. So I lost my mom and uncle in a car accident in October 2014. They were driving to our house for my daughter's birthday party, and I received a phone call that my uncle had died at the scene, and my mom was in critical condition, and then we learned shortly after that she had also died. So it was a really difficult shift for me to go from one day, the moment that stands out in my mind is I was getting out of the pool, chatting with a friend one moment. 5 minutes later, I was wailing in the parking lot, and my life had just been completely turned upside down. Yeah,
and other things too. It wasn't just losing them in your life, but also then losing your father.
Right. Yeah. So my dad, then almost 2 years to the date, we got a phone call. My sister and I noticed that he hadn't been answering our calls, and we asked a neighbor to check in on him, and it turns out he had also died suddenly. Both of them, none of them had reached retirement. I wasn't yet 40, and in the space of 2 years, we went from having sort of the typical family life anyone expects to having no parents. We actually lost 6 people in the next generation in a very short period of time, and family photos went from a full Thanksgiving or Christmas table to myself and my siblings and our spouses and children. So it was a very difficult time in our lives.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't even imagine so much loss and so much grief and so much sadness, and that you didn't even get a chance to prepare or to be able to say goodbye to those people that you love the most in this world. And like, talk about adversity, like how does one person start taking those steps to getting to, a place where you're like, go from sadness to feeling like you want to live again?
How do you get back to enjoying life again? That was my question. In the early days, I remember so clearly a few days after the accident, sitting in the car, and I was driving to Starbucks. That was the one part of my normal routine I was trying to keep up to pretend my life was feeling normal. And I was sitting at a light, and the person beside me was dancing to some music. And I remember thinking, how will I ever get back to that? That was me a week ago. How is that ever going to be me again? And really, it was just one step at a time, one day at a time. For me, it was really starting to connect with, what do I need to be happy? Because I was getting a lot of pressure from a lot of people around me to just pretend that everything was okay. People were uncomfortable with the pain I was in, with holding that space, and I understand why. But I knew I needed to connect to what I needed, and if I needed to cry, I needed to cry. If I needed to sit in bed watching TV, that's what I needed to do. And I tried to really focus on my own self-care and how I was feeling in the moment, and not go back to work until I started to feel that I could do that without there being repercussions of me being super cranky at the end of the day, because that to me was a sign that it was too early.
Yes.
That I still needed to work on myself emotionally.
Right. And I loved how you talked about how, lots of times we get praised for having this crazy strength, but it's not healthy, like something happens, you have major surgery, and you're like, I went back to work in 5 days, or 10 days afterwards, even though it was supposed to be 6 weeks, or, you lose somebody in your family and you get right back into regular life, that's maybe not necessarily, the best things to do, but it's like sometimes what we feel like we need to do for other people rather than listening to what we need to do for our own health.
Right, or sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it, I think. And it's actually something I've done in my life. So about 10 years ago, I had quite a significant injury and hurt my tailbone quite badly, and probably should have stayed off of work right off, but I didn't. I went back to work, and I went back to the gym of all things, and I hurt myself even worse because I wasn't listening to my body, and I ended up on disability for 2 years. I couldn't sit for more than an hour for 2 years. So I've been in that space of just be strong, just push through, and you know what? My philosophy is that life will find another way to slow you down. When you don't listen, there's something else. I don't mean necessarily that bad things happen because we're not listening, but I do think that there's lessons to be learned in these moments. So that was, for me, a first lesson, but this took it a step further for me about looking at how pushing through, that idea of strength being just pushing through, is, to me, really more about shoving down your emotions and putting on a facade. Mm-hmm. And I think you can get to a place of strength by sitting with the pain and feeling how awful it is and talking to people about it. Connecting with others, I think, is a really big piece. Connecting with others who understand, or even if they haven't been through something similar, who will listen and be empathetic. And I think that can bring you back to a place of strength where it's not a fragile strength like I think what I was doing before, where I was showing strength to the world, but inside was actually struggling without even realizing it. You know?
That you're falling apart.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And you really talked about getting connected to yourself. So what did that look like for you?
Right. So it's been a bit of a process. I don't think this happens overnight. I actually think it's been a good 10-year trajectory, at least for me, of working on this. But the first thing for me was really figuring out that it was important to spend time being still. I think I use, and I think I still do this to some extent, I use being busy as a way to keep myself from feeling my emotions. And so it wasn't actually a conscious choice after the accident. I think my energy just plummeted and stillness happened because I couldn't do much else in the moment. But as I started to feel a bit better, it became more of a conscious choice that I needed to spend time every day with no one around me and prioritize, whether it be yoga. I spend a lot of time outside in nature, hiking and paddleboarding and doing things like that. And it's different for everyone, but I think we all have to find time in our life to be still as a way to even tell what we need. Because when I wasn't doing that, I couldn't even tell what I needed to do to take care of myself. So I think that's a big first step.
Mm-hmm. And what I really love too is how you talked about like your perspective on life now and how you value time with people. So it's the fact of like, I'm not going to work an extra day this week and I'm going to take time and spend it with my family, my children, my sister, or whoever that is. And how important that is came because, life goes by in the blink of an eye. You just never know. Tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's been a big life lesson. I try to always remind myself when I'm making decisions. Even coming here, I was just on vacation for a month, and my first thought was, to take time to come to Halifax. It's, don't know if you can fit that in. I thought, you know what, you only live once. Do the things that nourish your soul. I wanted to come here today for myself as a way to nourish my own soul, be surrounded by like-minded women, and I always come back to, listen, if you died tomorrow, what is the decision you would want to make? And I try to let that be my guide in all my decisions nowadays.
Yes. If today was your last day. Well, we really appreciate that you were here with us today and that you shared your fearless story on stage, and for being a part of this interview and sharing it with our guests today. We really appreciate you being here, Lindsay.
Well, thank you, Sharla.
Be sure to keep watching. There's more coming up on One Woman. Welcome back to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown, and on today's show, we've been coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We just finished up our Fearless event, and I have another one of our incredible speakers from the day. You kicked off the morning, Lindsay. This is Lindsay Umla, and you kicked off this morning. And what was it like being on the Fearless stage? I'm curious.
Oh my goodness, a whole lot of things. It was amazing. It was incredible to just be in the room and surrounded by so many empowering, inspiring women who are just hungry for this kind of event and this kind of message. So it was so good to kind of feel like I was speaking to a group of my peers, a group of like empowered, ignited women. So it was so good, but it was definitely a tough act kicking things off.
Well, no, you did a great job.
Awesome,
You were a
thank
rock
you.
star on that stage. And you were talking today about bettering your body talk.
Yeah.
And that is such a big topic for women, because we've all had that I hate my body moment. You know, something they don't like about, you know, this is too big, too small, too short, too tall, too fat, too skinny, too whatever.
Yep.
You know, and we're our own worst enemy. So tell me a little bit about your story and why this became such an important topic for you.
So I spent the majority of my life really living in that space of self-doubt and really living in that place of self-deprecating thoughts and beliefs about not only who I was in here, but also my physical body. So I was born with a congenital heart defect, and so with that comes a whole bunch of scars and this belief that I was inherently broken. And so it was through kind of desperately trying to live my life for everybody else and really feeling so uncomfortable and trying to hide everything that I was and everything who I was, that I found this kind of disconnect. And I really was fortunate where I had some not so great life things happen to me as a result of trying to desperately fit in places where I didn't belong and not having that voice, because I didn't feel confident in who I was and I didn't know who I was and I didn't feel comfortable in my body. So I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to have that voice. And so because of those circumstances and those low points in my life, I had the opportunity to really wake up and really recognize what it was and the impact that I had in not choosing myself and how that was affecting my life trajectory, which eventually led me to my self-love journey and doing all of the work. And then eventually through getting pregnant with my first, number two, but getting pregnant with my first, that was really when I started to come to terms with the fact that my body does so much for me. And instead of choosing to be in this space of wanting to fix or wanting to change, there's so much power in just accepting and loving her just where she is and honoring and recognizing what she does for me.
Right. And how do you get there? Like, I think for a lot of women, you know, it drives a lot of our decisions, and maybe once it's not so positive in our lives, you know, you have, it affects your confidence and your own self-worth. So you wind up choosing, maybe you don't apply for the job that you think you're deserving, that you should be deserving of, or you get into that relationship because you feel like, well, you know, they're the only ones who's gonna like me, or whatever the case is, like things that are super unhealthy. And you know, you always wind up in this downward spiral. So what were those things that happened where you had that aha moment of, you know, this isn't serving my life?
Well, there was a few big moments, one of which was getting left at a nightclub by what I thought was my best friend at the time, which led to a very unfortunate situation of sexual abuse. And so that for me was my big, okay, if everything that I've been doing up to this point has led me here, why don't I try something new? Why don't I try just loving and connecting with myself where I am? And as far as like how to get started, the best place you can do, or the best thing that you can do to get started, is stop comparing yourself. Stop that comparison game, because you are not meant to be anybody else but yourself. And when we can really embody and embrace that and just be okay with not being Susan or Cheryl or Alice or whoever is around us that we've kind of been coveting via Instagram or social media or in our own life, and we really get invested in, okay, well, who's Lindsay and what does she have to offer? So many doors will open up, and you really, it's awkward in the beginning and it's strange in the beginning to kind of stand in front of the mirror and be like, I'm gonna love myself, yay, I am awesome. So it's like, in the beginning it can feel like you're living a lie, but if you keep showing up and you have that consistency in choosing yourself over and over and over again and choosing that gratitude and love over and over and over again, eventually it becomes your new normal, which is, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, and that's what I loved, is you really stress the importance of gratitude, as opposed to like, oh, I hate my thighs, or my, you know, my stomach, or my stretch marks, or whatever. What those things mean in your life,
Yes.
you know, and that,
Yeah.
you know, maybe I don't like, but it allows me to be able to walk and move, or my stomach allows me to digest and eat and live and
Yes.
breathe, and all those things that we just take for granted as
Absolutely.
opposed to just the appearance of those
Yes,
things.
absolutely. And it's so important to really take a step back and connect with that, because we're so good at taking all of this for granted and just kind of going about our day and not even thinking about all of the things that are happening, even on a cellular level.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yes. So talk to me a little bit about from where you were to where you are now.
Oh, man.
You know, do you even recognize yourself anymore as to the person you were in that talk that went on in your head before?
Yes and no, if that makes sense. So, I mean, obviously, I'm still the same little girl that I always was. But the difference is I'm just more of her. So in the past, when I was in that place of self-doubt and self-loathing and really not feeling like I fit in, because here's the secret, I was meant to stand out, like we all are. I felt like I was trapped, and I felt like I was constantly putting on the mask. And so it was this kind of feeling of fraud all of the time. And now it's just like I've taken the veil off, and I finally allowed that little girl who was really insecure because she was never allowed to be herself, to just blossom and be free and be loud and proud just the way that she is. So same person, just without all of the masks and the tricks and the stuff that I had layered on top.
That's awesome, awesome. And if there's anybody who's watching that really struggles with self-love, self-worth, self-confidence, acceptance, what would you give them as a tip, as kind of like that maybe first step to take?
Oh my goodness. First, this is going to be a two-part. First
Okay.
step is you've got to make the decision to choose you. You've got to make this decision to show up for yourself. But the next step to that is you've got to find your community. You've got to find those people who can kind of be your running mates and who can help lift you up. Because I will be the first to tell you that when you say yes, it's not like it's the doors open and there's sunshine and roses and like the angels are singing. No, that's when it gets really hard, because you finally are in that place where you have to face all of the decisions that you had been making in the past and recognize your hand in it all, and then actively start to rewire and rechange your thought process and your habitual patterns. And you have to remember that that took a lifetime to create, and so it's going to take more than just a moment to snap out of it. So you really, really need to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with amazing people, going to events like this, and just being in this space where you're filling your social media feed with the people that are inspiring you, that are doing the things that you want to do, that are speaking to the message of self-love and body positivity.
Love it, love it. Well, thank you for that wonderful advice, Lindsay, and for sharing it with our viewers today and all the incredible women in our audience. And be sure to keep watching. There's more coming up on One Woman. Welcome back to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown, and on today's show, we've been coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia. My next guest today, well, she wasn't a speaker on stage. She's actually one of the facilitators of our One Girl program, which we have that event that happens on the Sunday of every city that we do across Canada. And we never get a chance to kind of talk about One Girl. So I wanted to have...
Let's talk about that.
I wanted to talk to Jacqueline. So why was it so important for you to be a facilitator and have this kind of influence and impact on young girls in this world?
Well, Sharla, it was important to me because I am just beyond passionate about young girls and about female empowerment. So when I saw the opportunity, you know that I just went for it and I grabbed it, and I'm so happy about it.
Awesome. Well, you do a phenomenal job. So if people haven't heard about the One Girl program before, what's the whole idea behind inspiring and empowering the next generation of girls in this world?
Right. So our day looks a lot like a workshop. It's full of different activities and lots of group work, lots of interaction, really high energy throughout the day. And every activity is really geared towards building a girl's self-esteem, teaching her about different issues and experiences that she will grow up immersed in teaching her how to handle those situations as a confident, empowered girl. So we tackle issues like body image, general self-esteem. We teach girls how to use their own gifts to harness their leadership potential. And then we also tackle it from like a super feminist lens. So we teach them about gender and about sexual orientation and about just loving yourself and being who you truly are.
Wonderful. That's so awesome. And that's the thing, as a young girl now today, in a world with social media and the world telling you, you know, who you should be like, what you should look like, what their definition of beauty is. Like, how important is it for you to teach girls of how to navigate that and, you know, listen to what's coming in, but using to your own voice and judgment as to, you know, is this truly what beauty is?
Oh, it's so important. And actually our very first activity of the day is teaching girls how to literally deconstruct the beauty standards in the media. So we take photoshopped images and we take non-photoshopped images and we compare them, and we show the girls every step that goes into creating this falsified beauty image that we believe we're supposed to live up to. And the reactions are amazing, and by the end of it, they all know that they're beautiful just the way they are, and that they're not supposed to look like Barbie. They're supposed to look like themselves.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And one of the other big things is kind of like gender in our roles. So what's perceived as, you know, male and manly, and girls as feminine and, you know, pink or pretty or all those kind of things. So let's talk a little bit about that and why that was so important to include.
Right. So one of the biggest parts of female empowerment, I think, is breaking down gender stereotypes and breaking down the gender norms of women, so that girls can grow up believing that they can be anything, that they can do anything, and that their place is everywhere in this world, right? So we ask them, when you think of a typical man's job, what does that mean to you? Or when you think of a typical woman's job, what is that? And some of them give us the stereotypical answers, and that's okay because we're teaching them to deconstruct that. But then my favorite moments are when the girls beat us to the punchline and they say, there is no such thing as a man's job or a woman's job. And we say, yes, you're already so brilliant. And then we just build on that discussion. So we teach them that, again, there is no such thing as something for men or something for women, whether it's products or advertisements or jobs or even attitudes, right? And it's really great to see them just like come into their own after that one.
Absolutely. So tell me what kind of your main goals are that, you know, we have the younger age group in the morning, the 8 to 10-year-olds, the 11 to 13-year-olds that come with it, and, you know, they're learning the same things, but what are your main goals that girls leave with when they leave the day? You know, we have 3.5 hours basically with them, which is a short time to pack a lot of information in. But what's always your hope that when girls leave out that door that they get from the day?
My biggest goal for any girl to leave the day is for them to go home feeling confident in themselves, because I truly believe that you can achieve anything in life if you have confidence and competence. And us just giving them the power to see themselves as worthy, to know their own worth, to speak kindly to themselves. These are all mottos that we try to encourage them to remember on a daily basis, to know that they are important, and to know that they have power and leadership. That's all what I hope for them to go home with, and just to know that they always have a part in our One Girl movement, to know that they're officially leaders and they're recognized as One Girl leaders.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you are such a strong, confident young
you.
lady, Jacqueline, wise beyond your years.
Thank you.
And I'm curious as to where does that come from? You're such a role model to those girls every day, and you know, I see how you inspire them, empower them, encourage them. You know, where has this came from in your life?
100% the women in my life. I grew up with the most amazing mom, the most amazing grandmothers, and an incredible sister who I all have to thank for these lessons that I've learned. And it's really gratifying, actually, because a lot of the things that I now get to teach all these young girls are the fundamental lessons that I learned from my own mom. And even we have this journal online that the girls can go out home and print off, and even the things in there are things that I learned from my mom, like positive affirmations for a confident day, like just looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I am beautiful. Those are all things that I practiced as a child because my mom helped me do that. So I really grew up with a strong foundation of confidence, and I attribute that to all the success in my life.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you do a fantastic
Thank
job
you.
with all the girls in all the cities. So I just want to say thank you for doing such an incredible job of not just facilitating, but putting that program together along with Hannah. And we'll definitely have Hannah on the show in one of the cities as well. So I want to thank you for everything that you do.
You.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Be sure to watch next week with more on One Woman.